Hi, this is Dan from Bible Prophecy and Truth. Today we're going to be talking about the three main characters of the end time in the Bible: the great whore, the false prophet, and the Antichrist. Now, before we talk about who is the great whore, let's talk about what is the great whore, because that's a really important thing to understand. Is what is this entity, what is this woman, this whore that God is telling us about in the end time. And when God uses that word in reference, it's almost always referring to people that have turned away from him and true worship of God, and or added other gods to their worship. It happened a lot in the Old Testament where they would add other gods, and it just it perverted true religion, which is worship of Jesus Christ today, as we know. So who or what is this great whore? Is that she is a false church. She's a church, and it's only rarely that God uses that terminology when it's a completely false religion. It's only rarely that he uses it to refer to some religion that never ever worshipped him and is just completely false. It's almost always referring to the people of God that have turned away from him and perverted worship of God. Now, in Revelation 17 and 18, it talks about the great whore. And we're going to focus on Revelation 17 today because this is the one that gives us the description of who she is. Revelation 18 has a lot of additional information, but it has a lot of very similar information. But Revelation 17 really gives us the information about what is this entity. So I encourage you to read Revelation 17. You can stop the video and do it here, or open your Bible, and we'll talk about what this great whore is. We know she's a woman, and she's a church. She's people that have turned away from God. And she is according to Revelation 17, she is a woman, which is a church. She is the mother of harlots. And God has always used symbology in the Bible to represent the true church is a virgin. It's a woman that is a virgin. That's God's true church. That's how he symbolizes the true lovers of God. And this great whore in Revelation 17 has daughters. So she's a woman, which is a church. She's the mother of other harlots, which are the daughter churches. And she imitates the one true religion and worship of Jesus Christ as God. She imitates that, but does not do it. Now, the things that this passage tells us about the great whore is that she's a church that sits on many waters, which are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So she sits on many parts of the earth. She sits on the seven-headed, ten-horned beast, which is the same one from Revelation 13, which is the combination of the beasts from Revelation 7, where all of those nations that are in the world that will be in the earth at the time Jesus returns are combined into a one world government, which will be the New World Order, which is headed up by the Antichrist, as we talk about in other videos. She's arrayed in purple and scarlet color. She's the mother of harlots, like we just talked about. She sits on 7 mountains. She's a city that reigns over the kings of the earth, and she's drunk with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. Those are the things that are very specifically pointed out in Revelation 17 about who the great whore is. It gives us information to identify her. Now, there's some common theories that people have that it's New York City, or that it's the United States, or that it's Islam, or that it's the Vatican. So let's look at each one of these. Now, the thing we have to remember is that in order for prophecy to be true, it has to fit every single aspect of prophecy, or it is not true. So could it be New York? Well, New York is a city. We know that it's a city that sits on 7 mountains, right? We're told that in the passage, but New York City doesn't sit on 7 mountains and doesn't fit any of the other aspects of this entity. It's other than New York is a city full of sin. And could it be the United States? Well, the United States is not a city and is not a church, just like New York is not a church, does not sit on 7 mountains, does not wear purple and scarlet, does not rule over the kings of the earth, is not drunk with the blood of the martyrs. I mean, none of these things really fit this passage at all. So we can pretty much rule out New York and the United States as being this entity because there's too much that does not fit. So is it Islam? Well, Islam never worshipped the true God. Islam is also not a city. Islam does not sit on 7 mountains, and Islam does not wear purple and scarlet. The color of Islam is green. And we talk about that in the 7 Seals video, what the color of Islam is and why. And Islam does not rule over the kings of the earth. Islam has its own rulers and its own kingdoms, but it doesn't rule over anyone else on the earth. Islam has no daughter churches. And the thing about the 10 kings that we're told about in Revelation 17 is that the 10 kings, which would give their power to the Antichrist to fulfill God's will, it says that they hate the whore. And if the whore was themselves, then why would they hate themselves? And as we learn in other videos and other prophecy studies, that Islam is almost certainly the 4th beast of Daniel 7, and the clay that's mingled with the iron of Daniel 2, and is part of that kingdom that the Antichrist will rule at the time of the end when Christ returns. And the 10 kings are almost certainly Islamic nations that give their allegiance to their Mahdi, which will be the Islamic Antichrist, who is supported by the false prophet. So if these kings are Islamic, why would they hate themselves if they're the whore? So there's also too much that doesn't fit for Islam. It just doesn't work. So it can't be Islam. Now, so let's look at the Vatican. Now, the Vatican is definitely a church. It has many, many churches, but it is a quote-quote church. And the Vatican wears purple and scarlet. The Catholic leadership, cardinals, archbishops, and bishops, they all wear purple and scarlet as their standard colors. The Vatican also sits on many waters. This is a chart or a map that we've looked at in other videos, and it shows the population of Catholics in the world. And you can see she's spread out all over the world. She definitely sits on many waters, many peoples, many nations. And the Vatican is also the mother of harlots. The Roman Catholic Church is a self-proclaimed mother of all churches. And it's really true for most Western faiths. Most of the Christian churches today, Episcopals, Anglicans, Lutherans, and we know that the Protestant Reformation came out of the Catholic Church, and that was because they knew the error of the Vatican, but they brought a lot of things, Catholic tradition with them, and a lot of the churches today are really very apostate. They're nothing like the true church that God built in the book of Acts through the apostles. And I'm going to be doing more studies on that. I have a lot of articles on that on my website at BibleProphecyandTruth.com. And like I said, I'm going to be doing more videos to cover exactly who the daughters are and why. And there's a specific article I have under the notes menu on my website about where did the Catholic Church come from. The name of the article is The Origin of the Catholic Church. So I encourage you to read that. And like I said, I'm going to be making videos on all of these subjects as time goes on. One thing that we can note here is that in September of 2000, the Vatican City published an article where John Paul II's closest aide, Joseph Ratzinger, actually said that declaring the Catholic Church as sister churches to, from Orthodox to Protestant Christian churches, if we declare those as sister churches, that it's incorrect, that the Catholic Church is the mother of all Christian churches. And he stated that the term sister puts them on equal footing, and they're not sisters, but the Catholic Church is the mother. This is the Catholic Church claims to be the mother of all Christian churches, and like I said, it's really true in a lot of cases. And the Vatican also sits on 7 mountains. Rome is actually called the City of 7 Hills, and there's a book cover that I've got here showing that it's a very common knowledge that Rome is the city of 7 hills. And in the Catholic Encyclopedia it states it is within the city of Rome, called the City of 7 Hills, that the entire area of the Vatican state proper is now confined. And that's just the truth. It's that Rome is the City of 7 Hills. Vatican is within the borders of Rome and is virtually sitting on 7 mountains. So the Vatican is also a city that reigns over the kings of the earth. How does the Catholic Church conquer a nation? She turns the nation Catholic. She has a bow, definitely. She is a conquering power. And when a nation is more Catholic than anything else, the Catholic Church believes that she has the right to guide the political thinking of any and all of her members. So they really do rule. They reign over the kings of the earth. They're not the king themselves, but they tell the kings what to do. Now, is the Vatican drunk with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus? Over the years, in the Dark Ages especially, an estimated 68 million Christians were put to death for refusing to bow to the doctrines of the Catholic Church. And there's so much death specifically from the Catholic Church killing Christians over the years, because if you didn't abide by the dogma of the Catholic Church, you were called a heretic and they would kill you. And they burned many, many people at the stake. They killed them in various ways. And they even used the Crusades, which the Crusades actually started as a way to combat the rise of Islam and how Islam was pushing its way into Europe. The Crusades actually started to push that back, but the Catholic Church kind of used the Crusades as an excuse to go in and do their dirty work, and there's a lot of evidence of that in the past on how they did that. Now, one of the other aspects, or one of the other things that we see about the Great Whore is that she sits on the 7-headed 10-horned beast. That's a scarlet color in Revelation 17. And the same 7-headed 10-horned beast, it's the same beast that's represented in Revelation 13, which is the combined beasts of Daniel 7. It's the representation of the nations of the world that exist at the end time when Christ returns, and that the Antichrist uses to create his military, political, and political power base to rule the world. And that if you've seen my 7 seals video, where the first 4 seals are shown as the 4 spirits that are in the world in Zechariah 6. The first 4 seals are the 4 horsemen of Revelation. And when we combine that prophecy with Zechariah, we see that the 4 horsemen are 4 spirits that are in the world and have been in the world for a long time, and they combine to make this same representation that we see here, where it's Catholicism, capitalism, communism, and Islam all working together to create this one world religion, one world government that the Antichrist will set up. And it's this combined one world government beast that the great whore rides on, right? So and what this ends up being is the leader of the great whore is who the false prophet is. The false prophet will ride on the coattails of the Antichrist and will use his power to rise in power and rule the world with him as well. And he will do miracles such as pulling fire from the sky, and we're going to talk about the false prophet in just a second. And it's important to know that the great whore, the leader of the great whore, is represented by the false prophet, who is the secondary figure that rules the world with the Antichrist and will ride on his power. And so when we combine Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Revelation 13, Revelation 17, we get this incredible mosaic that God painted for us, this picture of the end time religion and the end time political rule, the nations of the world, and how the Antichrist combines those together. And the beast is represented as scarlet in Revelation 17 because it's going to be a communist or socialist government. The Antichrist is going to take over the world and rule as a communist leader, basically a socialist leader. It's not going to be a democracy or anything like that. And that's why, as we know, that communism is represented by red. And the scarlet color, I believe, is what represents communist or socialist government that the Antichrist will use when he combines all of these nations together. So the great whore, the leader of the great whore, will be the false prophet of Revelation 13. And it's really, really, really important to understand how these two are really the same thing. The great whore represents the church that is apostate, that is turned against God, that is doing their own thing. And the Catholic Church today says that worshiping Islam is the same thing as worshiping Jesus Christ, and that is an absolute lie. It is not the truth. She has definitely turned away from the God of Abraham and the God of the world, the God who came to this earth in Jesus Christ and died for us and rose again. So the false prophet is the leader of the great whore. So what else does the Bible tell us about the false prophet? Again, stop the video and read this passage here. This gives us a look at the false prophet and who he is. He basically has two horns, looks like a lamb, but will speak as a dragon. He presents himself as Jesus Christ, but is actually doing and speaking the words of Satan himself. The Antichrist is going to use this man to help him gain power over the entire world, because the false prophet is going to be this end-time religious leader that will work side by side with him and will actually do miracles in the sight of men, like pulling fire from the sky, and fool the world into worshiping the Antichrist. And the Bible tells us in Revelation 13 that this power is the power of Satan. He will claim to be of God and do these things like pulling fire right out of thin air, and will claim to be godly power, but he's actually going to be given this power by Satan. So when we look at who the great whore is and who the leader of the great whore is, we know that it's going to be the Catholic Church that aligns itself with Islam. And the false prophet, most likely Pope Francis, will align himself with a man who declares himself to be the Mahdi of Islam, which is the Mahdi is the Islamic savior, the Messiah that Islam is waiting for. And so the Catholic Church, we already know that their position on interfaith is that Muslims will worship the same God that we do and will be saved the same, will enjoy the same salvation. It says in Article 841 of the Catechism that they believe that Muslims will be saved just like Christians. And we know that's not true, but that's just the fact. I mean, that's what the Catholic Church's position is, and that's why she is the great whore. She is turned so against God and is actually supporting the devil by supporting Islam. And with support from over half the world's population, when you look at Catholics and Christians together along with Islam, it's over half of the world combined. And when he has that support, with a religious support system behind him of over half the world, and then combined nations of the world with Russia and Germany and Britain, combined with the 10 kings, those 10 horns, the 10 kings in Revelation 17 are going to give him their power. He's going to have all those political and military powers combined, as well as religious backing, to take over the world. And so what we're going to see is the Antichrist will rise as the Muslim Mahdi, and that Pope Francis will also support him and will be the false prophet of the Bible and will ride on his coattails as the Muslim Jesus. So we really need to watch Pope Francis and what he does in the coming years. And I know I'm really reaching here to say that it's Pope Francis, but when you look at everything that prophecy tells us and everything about the great whore and what's going on in the world and how it all is reaching its climax right now, if you watch my prophecy and the present times video, which I'll be putting out next, it talks a lot about where the Catholic Church fits into this as far as the statue from Daniel 2 and the 10 toes and where she came from and how it all kind of fits together with the iron mingled with the clay in the fifth section of that statue in Daniel 2, and how that is the revival of the Holy Roman / Islamic Ottoman empires, which have been in power ever since Rome failed, basically, and they've risen and fallen, and it's partly strong and partly broken, as the prophecy tells us, but it will be what the Antichrist revives, and it will probably be that the Pope will crown the Antichrist as king of the Holy Roman Empire, and he will be acclaimed as the Mahdi of Islam and will unite the world in the Holy Roman Empire / Islamic Ottoman empires, and they will be reunited, or not reunited, but it will be reignited as a world governing power, and it will be ruled by the Antichrist. So I'm going to end this video now, and we will talk about who the Antichrist is in the next video.